Hi there. So, welcome to the second chapter of FlexSim tutorial. So, if you've covered the last chapter or the last video, you have already understood what we are trying to achieve here. And in this tutorial, we are going to go through the FlexSim user interface. So, let's start. So, here is the overview of the FlexSim user interface. So this topic is going to provide a high-level overview of the most important elements of the FlexSim user interface and will explain some of its key terms and concepts. So we will primarily build a simulation model using two interfaces, the 3D model and the process flow tool, as we mentioned in the first video. So the 3D model is where we'll be visualizing our business system using 3D graphic. The process flow tool is where we'll be building the logic that powers your 3D model. Okay, so if I were to explain that in simple words, so FlexSim gives us the power to create our models in two methods. So one is using the 3D model where we can just visualize and the model will work itself. We just need to connect the nodes and the model will keep that sequence of operation. And the next one, which is more useful but difficult and complex and complicated, is we can use a process flow tool to define what should be happening with these blocks. Okay, so here we can see the most important elements of the 3D model interface are labeled in the following image. Okay, so here we can see it's showing us that there is a port connection, there is a task executor, there is a flow item, and this is a sync plane. Okay, so the process flow interface closely resembles the 3D model interface. So before we go to the process flow interface, let's see how we can achieve this in the 3D model interface. So for that, let's open FlexSim. Let's open a new model, click on OK, and you can see there is a source block, there is a GUI block, there is a processor, and this is the sync. Okay, so we are going to do something similar. We are going to take the source block. It should be under the library in the fixed resources. Just click on the source block, click, drag, and drop. Here we can see the source block is here. Okay, okay, that's good. So after the source block, we need a GUI element. We're going to do the same, drag and drop on the main screen. Then we need a processor, and after processor there should be a sync object, and there should be a task executor right here. Okay. Let's say instead of the task executor, let's just use an operator which is going to be operating this machine. Okay, so now let's see how we can connect the the output of the source block with the input of the GUI. So if I click on it, you can see there is some arrow here which will allow me to drag it wherever I want. So I'm going to connect it with the GUI block. Okay, so you can see a connection or a port is already been established. So this refers that the output of the source block is connected to the input of this GUI block. Similarly, if I click on the GUI block, I'm going to just click on this arrow, click and hold, and just redirect it to the processor. Another connection port has been created. So if I click on the processor, you'll see that with addition to the arrow, there is a rectangular port. So what this port is, this port allows me to tell this processor, okay, use this operator. Don't do this process without this operator. Okay, so that means the process that this machine is not going to be working without this operator. If this operator is busy, then this machine is not going to be available. Similarly, let's click on the output of this processor 1 and connect it with the input of the sync block. Okay, So now, if I run this model, let's see what it gives me. Okay, I can see some boxes are already flowing. Okay, yeah, the boxes is already flowing. Here's the QE build up, and it's going out. Okay, so that's exactly what we wanted. So this is the 3D model. So you can say I just connected the input and the output, and the model is functioning. So hopefully you understood the how to build the 3D model. And now let's go to the process flow. So the process flow interface closely resembles the 3D model interface. So it means that it's very similar to what we just did. So the most important elements of the process flow tool are labeled in the following image. So you can see this is the stacked block. That means there is two block, but it is connected together or grouped together. So this is an activity. This is a connector, and this is a shared asset. Okay, that means resources or something like that. Okay, so let's just go to the overview of the process flow interface. Okay. So the process flow view is the main workspace where you will build your process flow. So this is your process flow view. Okay. So if I come here and if I click on this process flow, and let's say I want to add a general process flow. So this is my process flow view. And you can create a new process flow by clicking the process flow button on the main toolbar on by using the toolbox. So process flow pane, when we are first creating a new process flow, the process flow pane will appear next to the model pane. Every time we create a new process flow, it will show up as its own tabbed pane. See, arranging windows and tabs for more information. So it is just telling us that if we create another process flow, it's going to be created next to each other. So these are the tabs. Okay. So the token, the most basic component of the process flow is the token as shown as in the following image. So this token is actually representing one item or one product, whatever it is. See, if I were to compare it with any logic, that this token is actually the representation of agent in any logic. So if you're familiar with any logic, you will understand it very easily. But just keep in mind, this is the unit, the main agent, which is represented as token. Okay, so the tokens are objects that flow through the activities in a process flow during a simulation run. They function very similarly to flow items in a standard 3D flow. So like flow items, tokens move from one activity to the next, much like a flow item moving from a source to a QE to a processor and so forth. But unlike flow item, tokens do not necessarily have to represent a physical object through a business system. Okay, so tokens can be more abstract, meaning they can represent anything you want them to represent. So what you're saying that tokens can be anything. It doesn't need to be affiliated with something physical. It can be a like a digital order. So it will just let you know what's happening in the system. So for example, it can represent a customer's order. Yeah. Call to the customer center, a logical grouping of pallets that are eventually loaded onto a truck for delivery, etc. So tokens will often be logically linked to physical objects in a standard system and to flow items in the standard 3D model, but they do not have to be. It is essentially up to us to define the nature of the links between the token and the physical elements in our simulation model. So at the most basic level, a token is just a bundle of data that is moving through a process flow. Each token can contain the basic information, the ID. When a token is created using one of the token creation activities, one of the source activities, it is automatically assigned a unique ID. Okay, a name of the token to better identify what is happening, the label, and other things. Okay, so let's go through the library. So in the library, an activity. Okay, activity is the first thing. So an activity is a logical operation or step in a process flow. As such, activities are the basic building blocks of any process flow. So the following image shows an example of a typical activity source. So if I were to show you here, okay, so the source, there are various types of source. Okay, it can be inter-arrival source, schedule source, date time source, event triggered source. Okay, so this is an activity which creates the token. So activities are dragged from the library into a process flow and linked together with connectors. So let's say I have a inter-arrival source. I'll just click on it, drag and drop it here in the process flow. Okay. So as a token enters an activity, it performs the logic associated with that type of activity. This can include assigning label, moving flow item, delaying a token, etc. So in some activities like the assign level activities, the token will start and end the activity with no time passing in the simulation clock. So while running a model, the token will not be visible in that activity. Okay, so the token will be visible here, but the token is not going to be visible in the 3D space. Okay. However, using the step button on the simulation control bar, you can see the tokens move through each activity one step at a time. In other activities like the acquire resource, the token may be delayed and wait in the activity until certain criteria are met. So let's expand on that. Okay, so let's say we don't need this model. We're going to create a new model, and let's say we're going to go open our general process flow. Let's say we create inter-arrival source. Here we can define the inter-arrival time. So 0 is the minimum and 3 is the maximum. Okay. So you can define the token name here, which will be maybe a label or something like that. So once the source is generated, let's say, okay, what's going to happen? Okay, let's say it's going to be delayed. Okay. And we can see similar to the 3D block, we can connect it with the next block. Okay. So once connect, let's say we can tell them, okay, go to sync. Okay. So now if we run this, what is going to happen? You can see some tokens are being generated in the delay, and after completing, it's going to the sync. So in the sync, it's being destroyed, and in the delay, it waits for between 0 and 10 seconds. So you can change the unit of this time from second to minute, hour, day, whatever it's required for you. So this is how we can also do it other than the 3D way. So it's the same thing. So I was looking for a QE block, but I don't think there is one here. Hmm. So here are some other task sequences, which is for the moving. We'll come to that later. Okay, okay. So let's get back to the 3D model. Okay, so in the 3D model, located in the center pane, the 3D model is the main workspace we will use to create a 3D simulation model of our business system. So we can drag objects from the library into the model to begin creating our simulation. When we are creating a simulation or running the simulation, the objects in our simulation model will begin to move and interact based on the logic you have defined in your simulation model. Okay, so objects. So yeah, so we already saw that, right? In our first model, the boxes are moving from the sink to the QE to the processor to the output. Okay, so the object, fixed resources. task executors, flow item. So objects are the basic building blocks of a 3D simulation model. Different types of objects have different purposes and functions within the simulation model. Some of the most common objects are flow item, objects that move or flow through the simulation model, usually from one station to another downstream station. That means from the input of one station to the output of another station. So the flow items can represent product, customer, paperwork, parts, or any other item that moves to various stations in our business system. So by default, flow items look like boxes, but you can change the flow items to look like people or other shapes. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. Okay, so let's create a new model and let's take a source. Let's take a GUI. Let's take a processor. Let's take a sink. So we have connected all the items or objects here. So these are fixed resources, okay? So you can see that if I click on the source, on the under properties there are many options. View setting, view style, everything. So let's see how we can define that box. If I double click on this, if I double click on this, so this option should also be here. Okay, here. Okay. So it's not important to double click. You can just single click here and under visual, you can see that it's referencing to a box. Okay. So this box is actually appearing. See if I change that to maybe something else. Hmm, let's see what other visualization is available to us. So visuals, boxes, there isn't much, but let's see. I don't see anything. Okay. So the options that I have is between box, cylinder, plane, sphere. So if I select sphere, you can see it changed to a sphere. Okay. So this is the item that's going to flow. So let's see how it's flowing. Okay. Okay. So it has not changed. Okay. Let's see why it's not changing. Stop. So this is a box, definitely. Let's see. Let's undo. Okay. So this is the visual. Okay, so here in the source, the flow item class has been selected to a box. Okay, so this if I change it to a tote, if I run it, we will see a tote is moving. Okay, so that's how we can change the visualization of the product that is being generated from this source block. Okay, so now let's go to the fixed resources, objects that remain stationary in the 3D model. So each fixed resource performs a specific function. Example, a source creates flow item at specific interval and introduces them to the model. A GUI stores flow items until they are needed to downstream. A sink removes flow items from the model and so forth. So as we are saying in the model, there is a source block that creates the flow item. There is a GUI block that holds the item. There is a processor which processes the items. Okay. So task executor, objects that can move around in the 3D model and perform tasks such as transporting flow item, operating machines, etc. The most common type of task executor is the operator, which can represent an employee in the simulation model. So the fixed resources are this source block, this QE block, this processor, this sink, and everything here. So let's say if we were to use an operator here in the between the source block and the QE block, and let's say I connect this with this one, and let's look for an option which will tell us that the movement should be done using an operator or worker. So here is an option, okay, under the output. So we have to click on the source block. Under properties, under output, we're sending it to the first available input, okay. So here we're going to click on use transport current dot center object preemption. Use transport. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, you can see now the worker is actually getting the item out of the source block and delivering it to the queue. Okay, because we have selected the option using the transport and we have connected the operator with the uh, task executor. So let's stop here and let's see there are many types of object besides the main ones mentioned here. So we can see there are many objects here. Yeah, so not just the operator. There can be a transporter, there is an elevator, robot, crane, ASR, dispatcher. Okay, so there is a lot of them. So hopefully in this second chapter we made some good progress and we got a good understanding about the basic model building, which will help us in future to build more complex models. So have a good day, and if you have any questions, you can comment below. And I would request you again to please like and subscribe to my channel so that you can keep up with the latest videos and latest tutorials. So have a great day and thank you for watching.